Welcome to the reading of the Sabbath School lesson for the second quarter of 2022. Welcome to lesson number 8 in the series on Genesis. It's titled The Promise, ready for teaching on May 21, and I'm Percy Harrold. Monday, May 16, God will provide. Read Genesis chapter 22, verses 8, 14 and 18. How did God fulfill his promise that he would provide? What was provided? Genesis 22, verse 8, And Abraham said, My son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. So the two of them went together. And verse 14, And Abraham called the name of the place, The Lord will provide, as it is said to this day, In the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. And verse 18, In your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. When Isaac asked about the sacrificial animal, Abraham gave an intriguing answer. God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, verse 8 said. Yet the Hebrew verbal form can actually mean God will provide himself as the lamb. The verb provide, yirehlo, Y-A-R-E-H-L-O, is used in a way that can mean provide himself, or literally see himself. What we are being shown here, then, is the essence of the plan of salvation, with the Lord himself suffering and paying in himself the penalty for our sins. Read John chapter 1, verses 1 to 3, and Romans 5, 6 to 8. How do these verses help us understand what happened at the cross, which is prefigured in the sacrifice here on Mount Moriah? John 1, beginning at verse 1, In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. And Romans 5, beginning at verse 6, For when we were still without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die, yet perhaps for a good man someone would even dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love toward us in that, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. There at Mount Moriah, long before the cross, the sacrificial ram, caught in a thicket by his horns, as we read in Genesis 22 verse 13, was pointing right to Jesus. He is the one that is seen here, as Abraham explains later, in the mount where the Lord is seen in Genesis 22 verse 14. That's the author's translation. Jesus himself had pointed to Abraham's prophetic utterance here, when he said, echoing Abraham's statement, Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it, and was glad. John 8:56. Ellen White writes in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 154. It was to impress Abraham's mind with the reality of the gospel, as well as to test his faith, that God commanded him to slay his son. The agony which he endured during the dark days of that fearful trial was permitted that he might understand from his own experience something of the greatness of the sacrifice made by the infinite God for man's redemption. End of quote. And so to finish today, how does what happened here help us better understand what happened at the cross and what God has suffered in our behalf? What should our response be to what he has done for us? This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.